They say the stars once sang here. Long before the silence, before the void-devoured melody and memory alike, the galaxy's spine was Cadia, radiant and terrible, a bastion carved from the bones of forgotten gods. Now, its remnants drift through space like ash on the breath of a dying colossus. World fragments hang in orbit, hollowed by war and weeping fire, reflecting the sunless glow of the eye that watches still. But the fall of Cadia was not a moment. It was not a blast, nor a scream, nor a cry for salvation. It was a choice, shaped over centuries by ambition, trust, and the illusions of immortality. And it began in the mind of Lord Marshal Erastus Karl. He stood alone on the bridge of the Cathedra Invictus that final night, staring into the crimson storm that pulsed in the void, into the warp itself. 1,000 ships of the defense fleet hovered in bleak formation behind him, gleaming relics from 1,000 campaigns. And yet Karl felt naked, not in body, but in soul, as if something old had peeled him open, bone by bone, leaving only the echo of who he had once been. He remembered his father's oath, Cadia stands. He remembered it whispered during blood rites beneath the basalt temples of Casagalan, when fire and steel christened him commander at just 17. He remembered it chanted by broken men in trenches outside the Eye of Terror, their faces scarred with the madness of demons. Cadia stands, Cadia stands. But now the eye had moved. The old priest said the warp did not shift. It hung, patient and eternal, a wound in the galaxy's flesh. But Karl had seen it. It pulsed now, grew like a cyst, as if something inside it had awoken and begun to press. The stars had gone quiet. The astropaths screamed in their dreams, and the ruins of Fornax 6, once a forge world ablaze with creation, now emitted nothing but static and sorrow. Kel turned his gaze from the viewport. He walked slowly through the command deck, boots echoing on golden alloy. Servitors bowed, their organic eyes long since removed. Machine priests chanted binary warnings from consoles that hissed and sparked. All of them shadows now, playing roles written centuries ago. Cadia was dying, and yet they performed. Karl paused before the reliquary alcove and placed his palm on the glass. Within, sealed in stasis field, lay the sword of Bastion, carried by the First Lord Marshal, forged in the blood furnaces of ancient terror. It had never failed to strike true, and yet it had not saved them. He whispered to it, not words, but memory, moments of grief held in silence. He saw again the battlefield at Lorthan Reach, where the 13th Black Crusade had bled across the stars. He saw the face of his brother, Alexion, a psyker touched too closely by the warp, who had begged Karl for mercy even as his flesh mutated, bloated with ruinous power. He had held the sword of Bastion then, and he had killed his brother with it. A necessary act, a betrayal. The distinction no longer mattered. Lord Marshal, a voice crackled through the deck vox. It was the voice of Magos Zeltrus, his old friend, his last ally. Even now, it sounded like steel being born from stone. The eye expands. Prognosticars across the segmentum confirm distortion patterns unlike any prior instance. We must activate the Aegis array or risk complete psychogenic collapse. Karl did not answer immediately. He stared into the reliquary as if it might offer him absolution. The Aegis array, an ancient defense grid left by the Mechanicum, powered by forbidden stellar cores. It would take the light of 10 systems to activate, 10 systems whose populations had not been evacuated. 10 billion souls burned for a chance to slow the eye. You said it might hold them, Cal replied softly. Zeltrus hesitated. It might. The words settled like lead in his lungs. He had once believed in certainty. That was the foundation of the Empire. Faith in the Emperor, faith in Cadia, faith in sacrifice. Now all that remained were mights, probabilities, trade-offs, sacrifices without meaning. You're asking me to kill more than the eye ever will, Cal said. No, Zeltrus replied. I am asking you to choose who dies, because either way, Lord Marshal, they will. Cal turned away from the reliquary. He walked to the command dais and looked down at the flickering display of the galaxy. His hand hovered over the activation sigil of the Aegis array. 10 systems, 10 billion, and a chance to hold the line. He remembered his mother's voice, reading to him from the canticles of remembrance, in the shadow of the pale fortress. A blade that never strikes rust in its own pride, but a blade that cuts without honor becomes the weapon of monsters. What was he now? A rusted relic, or something worse? He thought of the war yet to come. The Archfiend had returned. Abaddon, whose Black Legion now crested upon tides of demon and flame. Cadia was the gate. If it fell, terror itself would follow. Humanity would drown in a tide of madness. He pressed the sigil. The command deck dimmed. Lights flared crimson. And far across the void, 10 suns died. Their cores collapsed inward, igniting ancient machines forgotten by time. And with them, the last light of those systems, gone, like breath extinguished. Kyle collapsed to his knees. It had begun. The eye pulsed again, stronger, hungrier, but it paused, just slightly. And in that pause, Cal heard something impossible. The stars screaming. He would live long enough to see the gates hold, long enough to witness the betrayal seeded in his own ranks, long enough to know what he had saved and what he had damned. But for now, he knelt alone in the fading glow of the stars he had murdered, knowing that history would call it heroism, and knowing that it was not. The dead suns were still visible in the sky of Cadia Prime, even as their light failed. They hung like the eyes of forgotten gods, dim, hollow, watching. Lord Marshal Cale stood upon the obsidian balcony of the Basilica Resolute, the central spire of Cadia's command, staring into the remnants of what had been 10 thriving systems. Their light flickered still, not from hope, but from the slow delay of cosmic distance. Their fires had died the moment he activated the array. The people within would scream, suffocate, and then vanish, their sacrifice bound forever to the silence of space. He had bought them time. No one thanked him, nor did he want them to. The wind blew through the high walls, harsh and cold, dragging with it ash from distant Kassavan, where orbital bombardment had turned entire regiments into glass statues. They still stood, half melted, arms raised skyward as if asking the heavens why. Kyle had no answer for them. I warned you the cost would be high. The voice, mechanical and layered, echoed behind him. Magos Cheltrus approached with the steady cadence of a man who had traded flesh for steel long ago. Much of his face was hidden beneath a hood woven from data circuits. Only one eye remained organic, and even that flickered under layers of augmentation. Tubes pumped stim and oil through his veins, and his voice bore the modulation of 10 different dialect processors. Kyle did not turn. You once said the cost of inaction would be higher, and yet you mourn, Zeltrus said, stopping beside him. That, at least, is human. Kyle exhaled slowly. I mourn because I remember them. You forget that I knew the names of the governors of those worlds, their families, their children. I've walked their streets, shared wine with their priests, laughed with their soldiers. They were not a statistic. They were mine to protect. Zeltrus was quiet. Then, you chose survival. Did I? You preserved the gate. Without Cadia, the Imperium would drown. Kyle turned to him now. And what is Cadia, if not the souls we just murdered? They died for purpose. Kyle studied his old friend. You stopped calling it sacrifice. Zeltrus said nothing. He had always been like this, pragmatic, ruthless in logic, loyal only to survival. They had served together for over a century, Zeltrus having forsaken his mortality long ago in the forges of Mars. Yet once, before the metal, before the silence, there had been something else in him. A voice, a mind, a soul. Cal wondered when it had gone. Have the people heard? Cal asked. Zeltrus nodded. The ecclesiarchy will spin it into myth by dawn. Already the choir of retribution sings of the Ashen Ten. They will become martyrs, saints perhaps. Kyle looked away. He would rather they were remembered as real. There's more, Zeltrus continued. Our augurs caught anomalous warp displacement along the outer edge of Segmentum Obscurus, a vessel, ancient signature, unknown origin. Kyle stiffened. Not Black Legion? Number this one is older. The designation predates the heresy. It carries Imperial relic, identifiers, but heavily distorted. Encrypted Vox transmissions on theta black frequencies. Unintelligible. Cal frowned. Is it alone? Yes, but it has changed course. It's coming here. To Cadia. Zeltrus nodded. Cal's mind stirred with unease. He knew that name. The theta black frequency was restricted to only the oldest of Imperial archives, lost during the Age of Apostasy, forbidden to all but the High Lords of Terror. What's the ship's name? Lux Eterna. Cal's blood chilled. That ship should not exist. Before the heresy, before even the Great Crusade reached the Segmentum Pacificus, the Lux Eterna was said to be a pilgrim ark, sent from Terra to search for lost Primarchs. Its record ended 2,000 years before the siege of the Emperor's palace. Some said it had been consumed by the warp. Others said it had returned, but was buried by decree of the Inquisition for what it carried. If it was truly Lux Eterna, then something ancient and dangerous had awoken. Have we sent a reply? Kyle asked. Number Id does not respond to standard Vox. It repeats one phrase. Zeltrus turned, inputting commands into a servo skull hovering near his shoulder. The air filled with static. Then faintly, a voice emerged, garbled, twisted, but recognizably human. The light has failed. The air must remember. Again it looped. The light has failed. The air must remember. Kyle did not speak. His hands clenched. Something old moved in his memory. A name buried beneath 1,000 years of duty. A face he had not seen since before the siege of Rax. He felt suddenly cold. Then the doors to the command spire opened with a hiss. A young woman entered, dressed in an officer's coat marked with the twin eagles of Cadia's elite. Her dark hair was braided in the style of the northern Cassars, and her eyes burned with that fierce intensity Carl had once seen in himself, before the guilt, before the weight of survival. Commander Vera Solis, Zeltrus said with a nod. Carl regarded her with mixed emotion. She was his ward, his successor in all but name. Raised from a bloodline of old Cadia, trained in the siege temples, and tested on the fields of Vrax and Cradle 7. Brilliant, loyal, but also too curious. She saluted crisply. My lord, I bring grave news from Casa Typhon. There's unrest. The soldiers question the array strike. Some call it a betrayal. Others say you've damned us. Kyle nodded, unsurprised. Let them say it. It may be true. Solis hesitated. Her gaze softened. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Cal gestured. "Always. You did what you had to. I would have done the same." He looked at her. He saw in her the best of what Cadia once was, but he also saw something dangerous. Hope. "You say that now," he said quietly. "But when you've buried as many friends as I have, when your name is etched beside the worlds you condemned, you may wish you hadn't." She looked down, ashamed, but then raised her eyes. "Then let me carry part of it." Kyle turned away. He couldn't look at her. She didn't understand. Not yet, not fully. But she would. Because this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Lux Eterna was coming, and with it, the past would rise. Not just in memory, but in blood. In silence, he whispered the phrase, "The heir must remember." The Lux Eterna did not arrive with the glory of a returning relic. It did not descend with the hymns of Mechanicum choirs or the salutes of void-born sentinels. It emerged, like a wound tearing open in the sky above Cadia. One moment, the heavens were still. The next, they bled warp light. The vessel was immense, more cathedral than ship. Its hull bore the rot of millennia, its prow half devoured by time, its banners decayed to threads, waving silently in the void. It moved not with thrust, but with the weight of memory, as if the stars themselves parted to let it pass. And at its centre, fixed like a tumour upon its spine, was an eye, not mechanical, not organic, but something older. Watching. It did not broadcast coordinates. It did not respond to hail. It simply waited. Cal stood before the hololithic display in the basilica's inner sanctum, arms crossed behind his back, expression carved from stone. Commander Solas was at his side, face pale with awe and unease. Magos Seltrus hovered nearby, data tethers trailing from his spine into the pulsing mind of the sanctum's cogitator banks. His expression was unreadable, but for the first time in decades, he did not speak, because there was nothing to say. The Lux Eterna was not supposed to exist, yet here it was. "I don't understand," Solas whispered. "There are no life signs, no transmission pings. Its power core registers as dead, but the ship is moving." "Then something else moves it," Cal said. Quiet, distant. Solas turned to him. "You knew this ship." He did not answer. Her voice hardened. "You knew it, didn't you?" Cal closed his eyes. Not for the first time in his long life, he found himself standing between past and present, between the soldier he had become and the child he had once been. Back then, before the wars, before Cadia had moulded him into steel and silence, he had been Erastus, just Erastus, a boy of noble birth, yes, but fragile in spirit, a dreamer born under the shadow of the Eye. And on one long-forgotten night, as the skies above Casimir thundered with storms, he had found something in the crypt of the Pale Monastery. Not a weapon, not a prophecy, a woman. She was dying, pale and radiant, dressed in robes of black and white. Her voice was the whisper of galaxies collapsing, her eyes like void wells of time, and in her hand an obsidian shard thrumming with impossible resonance. "I was told to wait," she had said. "For whom?" he had asked. "For you," she had answered. He had fled, pretended it had been a dream, told no one, buried the memory like a knife in sand, but the shard had never left him. Not truly. Carl's voice finally broke the silence. "I was 12. There was a vault beneath the Pale Monastery. I entered it on a dare from the other Casa children. What I found there was not human. She said she came from Lux Eterna, that she was sent before the Great Heresy. that she had seen the face of the Emperor before he was entombed. Solace stared at him. "And you believed her?" "No," Cal said. "Not then. Not until years later, when the dreams began." Solace shifted, discomfort crawling across her spine. "Dreams?" He nodded slowly. "She spoke in them. Always the same voice. Telling me to remember, to awaken the blade. I thought it was madness. That war had taken more than blood. But now," he turned to the projection of the vessel hanging in orbit. "Now it's here. And I fear that remembering may cost more than forgetting ever did." Zeltris finally spoke, voice low and grave. "There is one chamber within the Lux Eterna, emitting a weak signature. Not biological. It is a resonant energy pattern, identical to the shard you carry." Cal stiffened. "You scan me?" "Of course," Zeltris said. "You wear a relic of pre-heresy design. Its signature is soul-bound. That should not be possible." Cal reached beneath his armor and withdrew the shard. It pulsed faintly, like a dying star remembering how to breathe. He had carried it for decades, convinced it was inert. But now it responded. To the ship. To her. "You must go," Zeltris said. Solace stepped forward sharply. "He can't go alone." Cal turned to her. "You will remain here." "No," she said. Not defiant, but resolute. "I swore to stand with you. I stood through the siege of Calix, the Gorgon Rains, and the betrayal at Vrax. If there's something in that ship that threatens us, I won't let you face it alone." Cal looked at her. For a moment, he saw the girl she had been, kneeling in the ash beside her dead squadmates, face blank with horror as she pulled him from the ruins. She had lost everything in the wars, and yet she had followed him, believed in him, loved him perhaps, not as a father, not as a commander, but as something stranger, a myth, a hope wrapped in uniform. "All right," he said. Solace nodded. Zeltris extended a data slate. "I've prepared a transport, a 2-man skiff, no escorts. If the ship senses a fleet approach, it may vanish again, or worse." Kyle took the slate and turned away. As he moved toward the transit hangar, Solace followed, her boots echoing behind his. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, as they neared the launch bay, she asked quietly, "What if it's not her?" Cale didn't answer immediately. Then something worse has taken her place. Inside the Lux Aeterna, only silence waited, but beneath its broken cathedrals and half-lit halls, something old stirred, a memory dressed in flesh, waiting for Cale to remember what he once was, and waiting to ask why he left. The Lux Aeterna did not welcome them. The skiff breached its outer hull in silence, gliding through one of the collapsed hangar bays, a yawning mouth half melted by time, its sigils eroded to illegibility. Inside, the ship was colder than void. Lights flickered not with power, but with memory. Phantom sparks dancing across broken pews, shattered altars, and stained glass windows depicting saints no one remembered. Solace stepped down first, rifle drawn, senses sharp. Her breath misted in the still air, her boots touching centuries of dust. Every surface seemed draped in cobwebs of time, metal that wept rust, banners fossilized into silence. Cal followed slowly, shard pulsing faintly in his hand. The darkness moved around them, not hostile, not alive, but watching. "Do you feel it?" he murmured. Solace nodded, her voice low. "Something's humming, not in the walls, in my head." They pressed forward. The corridor twisted like a cathedral torn through time. Archways bent at impossible angles. Vox speakers crackled with dead hymns. Statues lined the walls, warriors in archaic plate. their faces blurred, their hands folded over relics that no longer shone. Solace paused beside one, brushing frost from its nameplate. The inscription read, Erastus Kyle, scion of the ninth line, seeker. She froze. Kyle, she said slowly, this statue. He was already walking past it. Don't look too closely, he whispered. Solace hesitated, then followed. They moved deeper. At the centre of the Lux Eterna lay the Vault of Remembrance. Kyle knew the path, though he could not say why. Each step pulled at buried instincts, half-forgotten dreams, as if his bones remembered what his mind could not. Solace noticed the change in him, his gait, his posture, less burdened, less commander, more something else. When they reached the vault doors, they found them already open. Inside light pulsed, not harsh or artificial, but warm, golden, like the last rays of a dying sun. And there, in the centre of the room, sat a figure upon a throne of petrified bone and crystal. She had not aged, not truly. Her hair was silver now, though once it had burned black. Her skin, pale as voidstone, shimmered faintly with unspoken energies. She wore no armour, only flowing robes, lined with ancient script, and across her lap rested a blade carved from obsidian glass, its edges breathing starlight. Kyle stopped, his breath caught. Solace raised her rifle. Identify yourself. The woman looked up. Her eyes were wrong, not cruel, not possessed, but deep, unfathomably deep, as if they held entire wars behind them. Hello, Erastus, she said. Solace blinked. That's not your name anymore. Kyle did not speak. The woman stood slowly. She moved like memory, graceful, sorrowful, inevitable. I've waited long enough. Cal swallowed. You said I would forget. You begged me to let you. Solace stepped between them, rifle still raised. Enough riddles. Who are you? The woman regarded her for a moment, then gently. You must be the girl. The loyal one. Solace's hand trembled on the trigger. I am called many things, the woman said softly. But once, long ago, I was Seraphine, one of the last Echo-born, a vessel of the Emperor's light, before the warp poisoned the stars. Kale's face twisted. You're not human. No, she said. Nor are you. Solace turned sharply to Kale. He looked away. Explain, she demanded. But Seraphine answered first. He was born in Cadia, yes, raised by men, but his soul was shaped by the old ways, by the gene seed of a line long buried, the ninth line, the forgotten Primarch. Solace stepped back. Number, that's impossible. Kale's voice was barely audible. They were myths. They were secrets, Seraphine said, buried by the Inquisition, silenced after the heresy. But you remember, don't you, Kyle? You remember the dreams, the voice that told you to leave the past behind, to serve the throne, and forget who you were. Kale's hands shook. I wanted to forget. But you cannot run from blood, she said. Silence fell. Solace turned to Kale, her voice raw. You knew, all this time. You're not just a man. You're something else. I didn't ask for it, Kyle said. His voice cracked. I didn't want it. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to serve. I buried it because remembering meant becoming him again. And he wasn't enough. Seraphine stepped closer. He was too merciful, she said. Kale nodded. He believed in unity, in truth, in peace. And that was his mistake, Seraphine whispered. The vault dimmed. A hum began, rising from the blade she carried. The shard in Kale's hand responded, vibrating like a tuning fork, drawing toward her sword. The two fragments were once one. You brought me back here, Kale said. I never left, Seraphine said. I stayed, because you left the war unfinished. Solace lowered her weapon. What war? She asked. Seraphine's gaze turned to her. The war within. The blade ignited, casting a light that showed more than just faces. In its reflection, Cal saw what he once was. Not a soldier, not a marshal, but an heir. A being forged from Emperor's own bloodlines, designed to bring peace. But who chose obedience over identity? And now, the galaxy was burning, because he chose to forget, and Cadia would fall, unless he remembered. As the vault closed behind them and the shard fused silently into the sword once broken, a storm gathered outside the Lux Eterna. War would come soon, but it would not be waged only in space or trenches. It would begin in memory. The sky above Cadia wept fire. From the towers of the Basilica Resolute, the Lux Eterna could be seen in low orbit, its form shrouded in storm clouds and eerie warp light. Lightning danced around its hull like chained ghosts. Its presence distorted the winds, the tides, even the prayers of the astropaths. The people of Cadia did not understand what it was. They only knew that since its arrival, the air had grown colder, the stars less steady, and the birds, those few that remained, had flown from the mountains and never returned. Carl returned with silence in his eyes. He and Solace emerged from the sanctum hangar alone, their expressions unreadable. The sword of obsidian glass, newly reforged, hung at Cale's side, sheathed in stasis. Its pulse was hidden, but Solace could feel it. So could others. Commander Vera Solace had always been a soldier of faith, not in the Emperor, not in the ecclesiarchy, but in Carl, in the way he walked into fire without blinking, in the way he bore impossible weight and never asked others to share it. But something had changed in the vault. He had changed. He no longer hesitated, and it terrified her. The High Command had gathered in the Heliarch Hall, summoned by Cale in the dead of night. They stood beneath shattered mosaics of the siege of Hell Reach, their faces weathered, war-scarred, expectant. Among them was Lord Templar Harrix, commander of the Kasserkin elites, whose loyalty to Cadia was rivaled only by his suspicion of anything off-world. And beside him, the gold-trimmed robes of Preacher Saranos, voice of the Emperor's Creed on Cadia. Others were present too, fleet admirals, senior strategos, the mechanized envoys of the Martian priesthood. They had all fought for Cadia, and now they waited to learn whether Cadia still fought for them. Carl stood before them without ceremony. He did not wear his marshal's cloak. He wore only the obsidian blade, and silence. "I've seen the heart of the storm," he said at last, "and I know now why the eye has awakened." No one spoke. They waited. Cale looked at the room, not as an equal, not even as their commander, as something beyond that. The 13th Black Crusade has not come to conquer. It has come to close the gate, to destroy Cadia not as a strategic blow, but as an act of annihilation, a cleansing, because we guard a secret that must not survive. Harrix's eyes narrowed. What secret? Carl looked past him, at Solace. She did not flinch. "Me," Carl said. A cold murmur passed through the chamber. "I am not what I claim to be," he continued. "I was born on Cadia, yes, but my blood is older. My name is older. I am descended from the 9th Primarch, the one erased from Imperial record, forgotten by decree." The silence deepened. Shock passed through the command like a virus. "Impossible," Saranos whispered. "No such Primarch ever lived." Cal raised the sword. The glass sang with light, not loud, but certain. "I carry his legacy, not by choice. I denied it for centuries. I buried it, but the past has come for us, and if we are to survive the storm, I must become what I was meant to be. Which is what? Harrix demanded. A king, a prophet, a weapon. Kyle met his gaze. A target. Whispers exploded. Saranos raised a trembling hand. If this is true, you are an abomination. The Emperor struck those two Primarchs from memory for a reason. And yet, Kyle said quietly, he created them. Zeltrus, standing in shadow near the back of the chamber, finally spoke. The Aegis array has detected increased warp distortion in the outer sectors. Something vast is moving behind the eye. A force unlike any we've recorded. The Fall of Cadia may be days away. Kyle turned to the room. I do not ask for belief. I ask for unity. We must prepare not just for invasion, but for collapse. The eye will burn through the gate. Cadia must hold, but it may fall. If it does, we must ensure something remains. A memory, a resistance, a truth. Harrix's voice cracked like a blade on stone. This is heresy. Kyle did not blink. Then name it. Brand me traitor. Raise your rifle. No one moved. Harrix stared at him with cold fury, but did not draw. The chamber settled into a silence laced with fear. Later, in the private chambers overlooking the ruined Casa fields, Solas stood at the window while Kale removed his armor. Neither spoke for some time. Finally, she said, they won't follow you much longer. I know. You're not him anymore, she said. You're not the man I followed through Cradle 7, or the one who stood with me at Vrax. You've become something I don't recognize. Kyle walked to the window, stood beside her. I don't recognize myself either. I need to know one thing, she whispered. Are we still fighting for Cadia, or because of you? Kyle looked at her, truly looked. I don't know the difference anymore. Solas turned away. She did not weep. She did not salute. She simply walked out. And in that moment, Kyle knew. The final betrayal would not come from his enemies. It would come from within. The night burned violet. Above Cadia, the stars warped in their sockets, drawn into bruised spirals of dying light. The eye of terror pulsed like a wound torn into reality, and from its heart came shapes, not ships, not yet, but shadows. Warped gravity, gravity that watched. The first tremors had already begun, earthquakes beneath the old cathedrals of Casa Typhon. The surface split in lines too precise to be tectonic. Civilians vanished near the northern bunkers. Astropaths screamed in their sleep. But none of this made it into the official reports. The real war had shifted. Now it whispered in corridors. Commander Vera Solas stood on the balcony of the Eastern Strategium, watching the barracks drill beneath her. Men and women, some barely out of adolescence, ran formations under rusting floodlights, unaware their commanders had begun to sharpen their knives for each other. She could no longer ignore it. Cal had returned from the Lux. Eterna changed. Not mad, not evil, but not mortal anymore. There were moments when he spoke, and it felt like something older moved behind his eyes, something not born on Cadia. His tone had grown cold, oracular, like each word had been carved a century before it was spoken. Solas had not yet betrayed him, but she had begun to wonder if he had betrayed them. Still watching the broken ones march? Came a voice behind her. She turned sharply. It was Templar Harrix, leaning against the threshold, helm under his arm, scowl baked into his skull. His armor bore the red slash of frontline blood. No polish, no ceremony, only war. They deserve to know what they're dying for, Solas said, steady. They think they know, Harrix replied. That's enough for now. A pause, then low. You saw it, didn't you? Whatever's in that ship, whatever Kale is becoming, you felt it. She didn't answer. Harrick stepped closer. We don't have time to pretend anymore. Half the upper command is afraid to say it, but they know. He's not leading us. He's using us. Watch your words, Solace said. Her voice cracked, but not with anger, with doubt. Harrick saw it. That flicker, that first crack, he pressed. The priests want him exiled. The Mechanicum won't move against him, yet. But the Admiralty, they're watching. We're sitting on the edge of a mutiny, Solace. We can't wait for him to go full prophet and open the gates to whatever he's carrying in his blood. She turned on him. He saved us. At Vrax, at Calix, at what cost? Harrick snapped. He says he's the heir of a forgotten Primarch. Do you know what that means? Those lines were wiped from history for a reason. Do you trust the throne, or do you trust him? Silence. Solace looked away. Harrick's lowered his voice. There's a plan, a clean one. No blood in the halls. The sword never leaves his side, but there's a moment when he attends the quiet sermon, where his armor is off, where he walks alone. She closed her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because if you say no, I'll back off. Because I believe you love him. And because love is the last leash he has on this world. That hit deeper than it should have, because she didn't know what she felt anymore. Kyle had raised her from ruin, taught her how to survive, how to lead. But now he spoke in riddles, dreamed with his eyes open, whispered names in languages older than Gothic. She had watched him bleed beside her in the trenches, and now she didn't know if he could die. Harrick's leaned in close. You don't have to kill him, just walk away. Let us do what needs doing. Solace didn't move. She watched the drills continue. Soldiers laughing, cursing, hoping. Cadians. The last wall against the dark. Her voice came out, quiet. If we do this, and we're wrong. Harrick's reply was colder than steel. Then we'll be damned, but Cadia will live. In the Basilica Resolute, Carl stood before the sacred mirror, the one crafted from glass retrieved from the ruins of Old Terra. It showed not reflection, but truth. And tonight, it showed her, Seraphine, not in form, in memory. She stood behind him, not seen, not heard, but there. She had always been there since he took up the blade. Your shadow grows long, she whispered. They're going to kill me, Carl said softly. Some of them, Seraphine agreed. You knew this would happen. It had to happen. He turned toward her, though the room was empty. I am not him. But you could be. I'm not a savior. No, she said. You're a reminder. He bowed his head. And far below, deep in the catacombs of the basilica, gears turned. Hidden servitors activated. A stasis crypt long sealed released a breath of frost. The failsafe was awakening. The one Cale had hoped he would never need. The one he had built, in case they chose treachery. It began with silence. Not the kind that precedes prayer, or the quiet before command. It was the silence of intent, cold, measured, final. At precisely 0300 local, the basilica's tertiary power grid flickered, not enough to draw alarms, but enough to disrupt the internal sensor net. At the same moment, 3 strike units moved. Kasserkin defectors under false codes, their oaths buried under promises of survival. They moved through maintenance corridors, black-clad and voiceless, toward the upper sanctum where Cale slept alone. And for one moment, it seemed they would succeed. They entered his chamber without resistance. No alarms, no witnesses. Only Cale, unarmored, cloaked in shadow, standing at the window with his back to them. The strike leader, a veteran of Vrax, raised her blade. Do it, she whispered. The blade moved, and stopped. Not by her will, but because her arm was gone. In the space between seconds, Cal had turned, and with him, the obsidian blade sang from its sheath. It did not clang or shriek. It hummed, like a morning song. Her blood hit the floor before she registered the pain. "No," she gasped, falling. Carl moved through the other two like a ghost. One tried to shoot, but the bullet melted mid-air. The other begged, screamed, called him by name. He did not answer. He only whispered, "I warned you." 3 bodies, 3 heartbeats, 3 traitors who once would have died for him, now dead by his hand. Not a drop of his own blood spilled. An hour later, Cadia was aflame. The assassination had failed, but the truth of it spread like warp fire. The strike teams had been aided from within. Multiple commanders had gone dark. One astropath, when interrogated, revealed a splinter order had begun circulating among the outer Khazars, a whisper campaign, that Kyle was possessed, that the sword he carried sang with demonic echoes, that the Lux Eterna had infected him with madness. Civil war had not yet begun, but trust was dead, and trust, on Cadia, was the first casualty of betrayal. In the command chamber, Solace stood across from Kyle. The blood on his sleeves was not dried. "They were ours," she said. Her voice was not accusing but broken, not because they were dead, but because she didn't know if she cared anymore. "They tried to end what hasn't yet begun," Cal replied, voice flat. "Did you know?" she asked. His silence was answer enough. "Harrix." "Yes," Cal said. "He's in chains. You should have told me. I couldn't trust you." Solace flinched. There it was. Not a betrayal, but something worse. Irrelevance. He no longer trusted her, not because she was his enemy, but because she no longer mattered enough to wound him. "I never would have done it," she whispered. "You would have let them," Cale said. "And that's the same." She turned away. The room stank of burnt data loam and blood. The cogitators hissed softly as data from the Lux Eterna began to merge with Cadia's central archive, an integration that the Mechanicum had warned against, then obeyed anyway. Heretics, the lot of them. But even they feared what was coming. "I have to choose now," Cal said behind her. She turned. Between what? He met her eyes. There was no anger there, only weariness. Between mercy and control. "You won't survive both." "I wasn't made to." He stepped forward. "I will address the command in 2 hours. I will not lie. I will tell them who I am, what I carry, and what must be done." Solace stared. "You're going to declare yourself?" "Number." "I'm going to stop pretending I was ever something else." She stepped back. "They'll mutiny." "Some. Harrix won't be the last." Kyle nodded. "That's why he'll die tonight." Solace left the chamber before she said something unforgivable. In the corridor, she found herself walking without thought, steps echoing against polished stone once used for triumphal banners and funeral processions. She passed the vaults, the chapel, the wall where Cale's name had been etched after the siege of Hive Seraphos. She remembered kneeling there once, touching the stone, praying to him, and now all she could feel was a strange, nauseating pity, not for him, for herself, for the version of her that once believed heroes were real. That night, in the execution chamber of the Kasrkin barracks, Templar Harrix was brought forth, kneeling, broken, but unrepentant. Cale stood before him, robed in black. The obsidian blade shimmered faintly in the pale cathedral light. Harrix looked up. "You're not Cale anymore." "I never was," Cale said. Harrix bared his teeth. Then get it over with, monster. Kel raised, the blade. Not for vengeance, he said. Not for anger. For order. The sword fell. Blood splashed across the white stone. And in the far distance, above Cadia's tallest peak, the Lux Eterna hummed louder, awakening something deeper, something beneath the stone, something that remembered what Erastus Cale had chosen to forget. The descent began in silence. The Basilica Resolute was a city of stone and steel, but beneath it ran deeper veins, crypts sealed by sigils no longer taught, mechanisms no longer powered, doors etched in forbidden script, locked not by keys but by ancestry. Cal stood before the central gate in the crypt of the unnamed martyrs. The blade at his side pulsed, and the gate answered, not with machinery, but with recognition. Solas stood behind him, one hand on her pistol, the other clutching the rosary she hadn't worn in years. I shouldn't be here, she murmured. No one should, Cal said. The gate opened, and the world fell away. The passage beneath was not carved, it was grown, black stone, smooth as glass, lined with fossilized circuitry, organic and mineral, Cadia's bones. Light did not touch these walls, but still they saw, by the pulsing of Cal's blade, by the breath of something beneath their feet. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. Then Solas whispered, "Why now? Why return?" Cal didn't answer at first. Then, "Because it's remembering me." She frowned. "What?" "The world," Cal said. "This place. It's waking up because I stopped hiding, because I let the shard take shape again." He paused. This planet was never just a bastion. It was built to watch, to warn, and to bind. Solas touched the wall. It was warm. Bind what? Cal looked forward, and then they arrived. The path opened into a vast chamber, a cathedral of black ice and coiled roots. Above, a dome glimmered faintly, like stars trapped beneath stone. And in the center, a monolith. It was unlike any structure in the Imperium. Smooth, seamless, matte. It pulsed not with power, but with memory. Carl stepped toward it. Solas felt herself stop breathing. The monolith knew him. And as he placed his hand upon its surface, light rippled across its surface, burning into patterns, sigils, maps of stars long gone. And then, voices. They came not as words but impressions, echoes layered atop echoes, and in them Solas could feel it. The ninth did not fall. The ninth was buried. The chain was broken to keep the gate closed. But now the key remembers. Kale staggered back. The monolith pulsed, and suddenly images burst into their minds, screaming through their skulls. A child born under shattered moons. A father with no face, only a golden crown of fire. A fleet burning across a galaxy not yet broken. Two sons, one of peace, one of silence, bound by blood, broken by silence. And Cadia, young, unscarred, not a fortress, but a cradle. Carl fell to his knees. Solas reached for him, but he waved her back. "I see it now," he whispered. "See what?" she demanded. He looked up, eyes filled with something far worse than fear, clarity. "This world is not a shield," Cal said. "It's a prison door." The eye was drawn to Cadia because it always knew what was inside. He stood. They didn't build Cadia to defend against chaos. They built it to bury what chaos feared. Solas's voice was barely audible. "You." "No," Cal said. "The other." He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw it. Not madness, not divinity, but memory. Ancient, heavy. They locked him beneath the stone. "My brother, my mirror, the other sign of the ninth." Solas stepped back. "You have a brother?" Cal nodded slowly. "The first warden. He chose to stay, to become the seal. And I was sent away, scattered, forgotten, so that the key would never return. He looked down at the blade, but I came back. The chamber trembled. Dust fell from the stars in the ceiling. Solace reached for her communicator, but static hissed from it like whispers through a grave. "I don't understand," she said. "If they buried him, if they locked him away." "They did it because he asked them to," Kyle said. "Because he saw what would come if he ever rose again." He turned to the monolith. "But now that I've awakened this place, he will hear me." The ground split. Light poured from the base of the monolith. Not white, not warp green, but deep gold, like the dying sun of a forgotten age. Kyle stepped toward it. Solace grabbed his arm. "You don't know what's down there." "I do," he said. "Then you know it should stay buried." Kyle looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not Erastus Kale, not the commander, the savior, or even the heir. She saw a man who wanted to be wrong. "I need to ask him why." The chamber opened, a stairway descended, and Kale stepped into the dark. Solace stood at the threshold for a long time, shaking. Then, with nothing left to believe in but the echo of footsteps, she followed. The stairway beneath the monolith was not built, it had grown. A spiral path carved into the marrow of Cadia itself, glassy walls pulsing faintly with amber light. The deeper they went, the less it felt like a world. It felt like a womb, or a tomb still breathing. Solace walked behind Kale in silence. She had stopped pretending to understand him. He no longer looked like a man shaped by war. He looked like a man shaped by purpose, the kind that made war itself seem incidental. The air grew warmer, not in heat, but in memory. Each step pressed something into her thoughts, voices, glimpses, flickers of another time. A battlefield in orbit around a green jewel world, a woman singing beside a shattered cathedral, a child, Kale, screaming as stars fell from the sky, none of it hers, all of it real. Then the stairway ended, and the world opened. Some Tittus. The vault was a chasm of silence. Its ceiling vanished into a haze of golden mist. The walls bore no adornment, only flowing script that shimmered as Kale passed. In its center, a single shape, a throne of obsidian, half buried in roots of petrified crystal, and in it, still unmoving, was him, the warden. He was not armored, he was armor. A body of impossible proportion, clad in ancient plates that pulsed with quiet power. His face was hidden behind a helm that bore no eye slits, no sigils, just a blank mask of iron. And yet he breathed, not through lungs, but through time. Kyle stepped forward, and the chamber shifted. The throne reacted. The roots uncoiled like ancient serpents yawning from slumber, and the warden stirred. His head turned. Kyle did not speak. The voice that emerged was not sound, but impact, felt in the spine, in the teeth. "You should not have come." Kyle stood firm. "You knew I would." "Yes. That is why I chose exile. That is why I buried my name." Solace stepped back. The air itself bent around the warden's voice, like the warp pressing against the skin of reality. Kyle raised his head. "I remember now," he said. "Not everything, but enough." "Then you remember why we fell?" Kyle nodded. "We weren't meant to survive the great work. Father made us different. Not weapons, not kings, warnings. And yet here you are, carrying the blade." Kyle touched the hilt at his side. "The shard of Ithissar. A prison key. It should not exist. I didn't forge it. But you awakened it. That is worse." Silence. Kale stepped forward. "I came to ask," he said quietly. "Why did you stay? Why did you become this?" The warden did not move, because someone had to remain unbroken, because Father feared what we might become if we chose. The others, our brothers, they were built for war, for dominion. But we were the test, the mirror. He hid us because he feared what he saw in us. Cal closed his eyes. And what did he see? That we could say no. That we could walk away. Solas looked between them. Realization dawning slow and terrible. You're not Primarchs, she said. You were the fail-safes. The warden turned toward her, not by movement, but by will. We were the reminders of what power costs. Kyle's voice cracked. So what now? Now that you have returned, the seal weakens. The eye feels it. That is why the warp trembles. Why Abaddon comes, not for conquest, but to break the seal, to unleash what even the gods forgot. Kyle knelt. I didn't come to wake you. I came to warn you. It is too late. Your presence is the warning. The lock recognizes its key. It is already beginning. The chamber shuddered. Faint tremors. Dust fell. The air thickened with age. Soon, the gate will fall, and something older than chaos will rise to walk the stars again. The bound one, the silence beyond the veil, the thing Father chained with our blood. Solace gripped her weapon, though it meant nothing now. Cale looked up at his brother. Then help me. The warden did not answer. Cale's voice rose, not pleading, but breaking. Help me stop it. Come with me. If Cadia falls, Cadia must fall. Cal froze. The words struck like ice. What? It is the only way to renew the chain, to reset the lock. Cadia's death is the sacrifice. It was always meant to die. Cal stood. No. Yes. You were the escape. I was the anchor. Now you've returned, and the eye opens. There is only one way to stop the silence. You must kill me, Solace gasped. You're mad. No, the warden said. I am the cost. Kyle shook his head. You're asking me to end the last of us. I am not asking. I am offering. Because if you don't, Cadia will fall for nothing. Kyle stepped back. Tears welled, not of grief, but of understanding. He looked at Solace. She saw it in him now. He believed, and he hated himself for it. The warden sat unmoving, silent, waiting. The blade at Cale's side pulsed once, then stilled. The chamber dimmed, and Cale spoke 3 words. Not now, not yet, not until the next chapter, where Cale must choose. Kill his brother and sacrifice what remains of himself. Or defy the very reason Cadia exists, and doom everything to the silence that waits. They rose in silence. No words passed between them. Not in the winding dark, not in the broken vaults beneath the basilica. The monolith watched them go with pulsing gold and slow, knowing stillness. Carl's footsteps were steady. Solace's were not. She had heard things she wasn't meant to survive, things that didn't belong to human minds. And she knew, now, what no one else on Cadia would believe. They emerged from the vault beneath the basilica just after midnight. The air was thin. The lights had shifted to emergency patterns, orange, cycling, uncertain. The cathedrals hummed with low-gear warnings. Soldiers marched double time. Vox traffic had tripled. War had come home. Kyle paused at the threshold of the basilica gates, looked up. Above them, the Lux Eterna had moved. It no longer hovered in low orbit. It circled, slower now, drawn by something unseen. Someone's taken control, Kyle said, or something is calling it. Solace nodded faintly. They know you're back. He looked at her, surprised. She didn't blink. They don't just fear you anymore. They hate you. They think you're the reason this is happening. Kyle gave a faint, hollow smile. They're not entirely wrong. They walked. The outer Khazars had already gone dark. Entire sectors of Cadia's planetary defense grid were no longer responding. Reports flickered in, broken astropathic signals, command posts overrun, fleets gone silent. The Eye had begun its feast, and in the central command tower of High Strategium Typhon, a new council had formed. Not elected, not announced, just assembled. Solas recognized them all. High Marshal Vendros, who had once wept at Kurl's speech over the fallen of Seraphos. Warmagus Tyrin, whose machines had once bled with the name Kurl carved into their cores. And at the centre, Admiral Tira Mors, a woman of ice and thunder. She turned as Kurl entered, flanked by Solas. Her hand rested on the holster at her side. "You were told not to return here," she said. Kurl didn't stop walking. You stopped being able to give orders the moment you started listening to fear. Tira's eyes narrowed. The outer sectors are burning. Warp storms have sealed half our evacuation routes. Entire void wings have vanished. And your answer is still riddles and prophecy. "No," Kyle said. "My answer is truth." He stepped onto the central platform. "You want to know why Cadia is under siege? Why the Eye grows stronger? Why every weapon and shield is failing now, at this exact moment?" He drew the obsidian blade, not in threat, but in offering. "Because I'm here, and because this world was made to die with me." The room fell silent. One commander drew breath, another drew a sidearm. Kyle continued, "This planet is not a fortress, it's a coffin. And the moment I stepped onto its surface again, the seals began to crack. The Eye knows. That's why Abaddon comes. Not to destroy Cadia, but to wake what sleeps beneath it." Vendros scoffed. "You sound insane." Solas stepped forward. "He's not wrong." All eyes turned. Solas didn't flinch. "We found the Warden." Silence. The last of the Forgotten Sons, buried beneath the basilica. Still alive. Still watching. A whisper moved through the room like wind before the flame. "And he told us," she said. "This world was always meant to be sacrificed. Its death is the lock, the final binding. Kyle's return has started the countdown." Tira Mors spoke quietly. "Then what do you propose?" Kyle looked across the room, at the banners that still bore his name, at the war leaders who once followed him into storms of fire. "I go back," he said. "I do what I should have done before." "And kill the Warden," Solas said, her voice soft. Kyle didn't answer, because everyone already knew. Vendros stepped forward. "And if you fail, what rises then? What nightmare do you loose upon the stars?" Kyle met his eyes. "I won't fail." "And if you don't go back?" Tira asked. Kyle turned toward her. "Then Cadia dies for nothing." She drew her pistol, not in rage, in inevitability. "Then I can't let you leave." Solas moved, drawing her blade, too slow. Kyle raised a hand. "No." He stepped forward. If Tira was surprised, she didn't show it. He placed the hilt of the blade on the floor between them. "You want to stop me?" he said quietly. "Do it. But you'll need someone else to hold the gate closed, and I promise you, there is no one left." Her hand trembled, and she let it fall. The pistol clicked, unloaded. Kale turned to leave. "Get ready," he said. "For what?" someone asked. Kale didn't stop walking. For Cadia to become what it was always meant to be. That night, Kale stood once more beneath the stars. The Lux Eterna had stopped moving. It now pointed toward the Eye of Terror like a compass needle drawn to a black sun. The air had grown wrong. Not wind, breath. As if something vast and old had turned its face toward the world and remembered what it had once buried here. Solas stood beside Kyle. "I'm going with you," she said. Kyle didn't argue. "Then we go," he said. "And what happens if you kill him?" she asked. He didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. The descent felt shorter this time. There was no awe now, no wonder. The monolith gave no light as they passed. It had seen the decision etched in Cale's eyes, and had no need to speak again. The breath of Cadia itself was slow and low, like an old beast asleep but dreaming of fire. Cale walked ahead of Solas, silent. She no longer asked questions. She knew the shape of the answer. They crossed the final threshold into the vault of chains, and there, as before, sat the warden. He had not moved, but the roots had. They had coiled back, revealing more of his form. Not to welcome, to bear, as if to say, there is no hiding now. Strike where you must. Cale approached, blade sheathed, but humming. Solas remained by the stairwell, arms folded, gun untouched. The warden turned his head. "I dreamed of this." Cale said nothing. "You held the blade." "But you wept." Cale drew the weapon slowly, letting its black edge reflect the gold light bleeding from the floor. "I'm not here to weep." The warden tilted his head slightly. "Number, that part of you is already dead." Cale's grip tightened. "You said this was the only way." "And it is." "But it is also your choice." Cale's jaw clenched. "You want this. I accept this." Cale circled slowly, never taking his eyes off the throne. The obsidian floor shimmered with memories as he moved. Every step awakened another flash. 2 boys, sparring in a void-hung temple. A father with no eyes, watching from a throne of gold. A gate, a choice. One walked through, one stayed behind. "You let them forget us," Cale said. "It was necessary. They thought we died. We did." Cale stopped walking. "I was broken," he whispered. "I bled for their wars. I led them, lost them, loved them. And all that time, you were sleeping. I was watching. Every moment, every scream. I saw what our brothers became. And I knew I must not." Cale's hand trembled. He saw it now. Not just the warrior, not the warden, not the martyr. His brother. He remembered his voice when it laughed. The way he moved with silence and grace. The boy who once carved stars into stone and named them after forgotten gods. The one who stayed so that Cale might live. "I hate you for this," Cale said. "You should." Cale stepped forward. "Why me? Why leave me?" "Because I believed you would come back." The blade rose. Solas held her breath. "Because I knew you would choose." Cale hesitated, and the warden whispered, "Do it, and make this mean something." The vault dimmed. The blade fell. A single strike. No scream, no struggle. Only light, gold and black, bleeding from the roots like the last breath of a dying star. The throne shattered, and the warden was gone. Cale stood over the remains, trembling, not from grief, from completion. Something ancient screamed far above, felt but not heard. The eye flared. Solas approached slowly. She saw Cale drop to his knees, not in prayer, but in collapse. "You did it," she said softly. Cale didn't answer. He looked at the obsidian floor, now cracked and leaking light. "It's not over," he whispered. "The chain isn't whole." "What?" He looked up, eyes wide. "It needs another." Outside, the world was ending. The first impact craters scorched Cadia's upper plateaus. Fire fell from orbit. The void screamed with warp fire. Black Legion drop pods struck the Cassars like hammers. Vox channels were filled with blood and static. But beneath all of it, in the dark, Cale stood. He looked at Solas, and Solas saw what he meant to do. "No, it has to be me. You'll die. I was always going to die." He handed her the blade. "I need you to hold the gate." She shook her head, tears rising. I can't. You can, Cal said, voice steady now, because you still believe. He turned to the throne, where light still bled from stone and memory. He took the warden's place. The roots stirred, began to grow. Solace fell to her knees. The last thing Cal said before the chamber sealed. Make Cadia mean something. And then the vault closed, the chain held. Above, the Black Legion broke the skies. But something deeper stayed buried, for now. Fire fell like rain, not from clouds, but from orbit. Black shards of iron and flame screamed down from ships older than reason. Traitor hulls lit the skies in crimson arcs. Cadia's defences blazed, plasma towers, aegis barriers, dozens of cassas blinking into the void, burning until they fell into silence. Solace stood in the command spire of Casa Typhon, the last stronghold left with full power. Around her, officers shouted, maps burned, signals vanished mid-sentence. But she said nothing. Her eyes were empty, and yet her voice was clear. Pull the third shield wall back to the Ardent line. Redirect siege cannons to cover the basin. Prepare every casa for last engagement protocol. The order shocked them. One officer choked. Ma'am, if we activate last engagement, we hold, she said coldly. To the last voice. A long pause. Then, yes, Commander. The rank tasted wrong in her mouth, but she didn't spit it out. There was no time to grieve, only to mean something. In the deep vault, Cal breathed no more, but the chamber was sealed now, roots and sigils glowing faintly, trembling every time the warp howled overhead. Something ancient stirred beneath Cadia, but it did not rise. Kyle's sacrifice held. Solace felt it even now. The silence below her wasn't empty. It was resisting. So she would too. The first drop pods pierced the sky an hour after the last of the orbital defences died. Black Legionnaires, clad in screaming brass and flayed symbols, struck the surface like arrows of ancient hate. The ground trembled. The bastions cracked. And Cadia answered, not in surrender, but with fire. For every 10 that landed, 7 burned. For every fortress they cracked, another was rigged to fall with it. This was not a defense. It was vengeance. Solace took the field herself. She wore Cale's old armor, not in tribute, but necessity. It was damaged, cracked in the chest, scorched by warp fire from his last campaign. But it still bore the sigil of the unforgotten, the twin stars. One bright, one black. She stood atop the bastion of the third flame as the enemy surged through the ruins. There were no banners now, no war hymns, no prayers, just steel, flame, grit, just Cadia. And she fought, not as a hero, as a final echo. The warden may have been buried, but she carried the sword now, the shard of Ithissar, cold obsidian in her hand, still humming with the last breath of a dead brother. She drove it into the hearts of traitors who did not know its name, and whispered it to them with every kill. By dawn, the Black Legion had taken the upper Cassas. By midday, the Void fleets had silenced the last Vox signal from the western rim. But Cadia did not fall. It burned itself, in defiance, in spite. As Solace ordered the final collapse of the core bunkers, she sent one message out, not through Vox, but through astropathic scream. Cadia falls not in silence but in meaning. The key has turned, the gate is closed, and we remain until the end. In the hours that followed, she led the final defense of the cathedrals. 10,000 warriors, half broken, half mad, but all unwilling to let Cadia pass into myth without taking the traitors with them. And as the skies shattered, stars flickering, warp storms blooming, She stood atop the last bastion, the shard in her hand, her voice broken, but her will uncut. And when the last of her gunners fell, she turned to the traitors and said simply, "Come then. We have not yet died." The sky was falling. Not a metaphor, not poetic exaggeration. The Lux Eterna, once the symbol of Imperial might above Cadia, had broken orbit. Not from defeat, from impact. One of the Black Legion's captured Blackstone fragments had slammed into it hours ago, and now its husk, mile-long and burning, was coming home. Its descent raked across the heavens, dragging trails of white fire and molten metal. It would not land. It would end. Solace watched it from the inner sanctum of the Basilica Resolute. What little of it remained. The eastern spires had collapsed. The great dome had fractured. The air reeked of ozone, ash, blood, and memory. There were fewer than 100 defenders left. No command, no walls, no reinforcements, only resolve. She stood before the gates of the inner sanctum. The doors Kyle had once opened. The doors that led to the Vault of Chains. The doors she now held closed. The shard of Ithissar hung from her belt. A weapon of old things. A lock. A last breath. She touched it. It pulsed once. Behind her, across the Vox channels, only static. And then, "This is Lieutenant Vane. Final transmission from Casa Sunhold. Glory to the 9th. We see you, Commander. Hold the light." Static again. She breathed out. The ground shook as the Lux Eterna entered lower atmosphere. She had hours, maybe less. She descended the steps one last time, not into the vault, but to the threshold stone, the place where Cal's blood had fallen. And there, as the air pulsed with a deep metallic pressure, she felt it. The silence, but not empty. Held. Cal was there, not alive, not dead, not asleep, not gone. Enduring. She knelt, not in prayer, in promise. "I won't let them break what you died to bind," she whispered. Then, to the air, to the planet, to the eye above. "I see you." The vault trembled, not in rage, not in hunger, in recognition. She returned to the surface just as the first shards of the falling Lux Eterna tore across the horizon. Entire mountains disintegrated, oceans rose into the sky, vaporized. Time became irrelevant. Only meaning remained. And Cadia. Cadia made her choice. Solace activated the last failsafe in the Basilica core, a mechanism long buried, a pulse triggered only by the bloodline of the 9th, a chain of events older than any Imperial protocol. Power surged into the vault below. Cal's final breath met the stone, and the lock closed, not on a vault, on the eye itself. A shockwave pulsed through space, not from explosion, but from silence. A sudden, staggering absence. The eye of terror flickered, screamed, and for one impossible moment, it recoiled. 1,000,000 demons howled in confusion. The Black Legion faltered. Their gods, for the first time in an age, blinked, because something beneath Cadia had bitten back. The Lux Eterna struck the planet. The Basilica cracked, the vault screamed, and Solace looked into the fire and whispered the last words of Cadia. "We die, but we do not fall." Cadia was broken, but the lock held. The eye had not devoured it, its purpose fulfilled. And in the black of space, long after the fires had faded, a signal drifted outward. Not a cry for help, not a prayer, just one line repeating, "Cadia stands." They called it the Cadian Silence. Across the segmentum obscurus, the maps changed. Worlds once chained to Cadia's beacon drifted, unmoored. Command networks realigned. Fleet routes recharted. The stars did not mourn. They adjusted. The administratum issued its writ. Segmentum anchor designate lost. System of Cadia declared ruined beyond reconstitution. Records sealed under martyr clause. And that was that. 1,000 voices sang hymns. Statues were raised to Solace and Kale, their faces carved from vague memory. Sermons praised their loyalty. No one mentioned the vault. No one mentioned the shard. That truth was too dangerous to remember. But the signal never stopped. Somewhere, in the deep black between the stars, a long-range astropathic echo continued to transmit. Every 13 hours. Just 5 words. The chain is still whole. For most it was noise. A dead planet's last sigh. But not for all. On a station orbiting the edge of the eye, Athros Watch, long abandoned and repurposed by rogue elements, a tech priest with a cracked voice and sleepless eyes captured the signal, listened, calculated, and wrote, pattern consistent, warp fluctuation indicates living tether, origin point, unknown, possibly buried active protocol, suggest quarantine or pilgrimage. He signed it with a broken cog and sent it into silence. No one answered. Not yet. Elsewhere, on a forge world whose name had been lost to Mechanicus dialect drift, a young Magos dissected relics recovered from the Cadian orbitals. Among the carbon-slagged fragments, she found something impossible. A shard of obsidian, still warm, still humming. She heard a voice in her dreams, though she never remembered what it said. When she awoke, she began carving stars into her forge wall. No one taught her the pattern, but it matched a constellation that no longer existed. Time passed, years, then decades, then longer. The Imperium's wars did not end. The Black Legion did not vanish. The eye still howled, but it never opened further. No one noticed, or rather, they thought it natural, fortuitous, divine intervention. But somewhere in the void, a buried vault still pulsed with restrained force, and a body, once named Kale, still sat bound in living chains, dreamless and deadless, keeping the silence asleep. And Solace, the records say she died in the last bombardment. Some say her body was never found. Others claim her voice was the one that sent the last transmission. Her mind broken into the weave, living in the vox itself. A whisper, a warning, a ward. But if you stand on the cracked edge of a dead casa, where nothing grows, and even warped beasts avoid the soil. Sometimes, if the wind is right, and the silence deep, you might hear a voice. Cadia does not fall. It is spent, so others may stand. And maybe, then you'll understand. It wasn't a planet. It was a lock, and someone paid to keep it closed. There is a place where no warp storm reaches. A pocket of silence in the maelstrom. A corridor in the eye of terror where the tides turn backward. Nothing grows there. Nothing hunts. Even demons whisper when they pass its edge. The maps name it null space Theta 7, but old voices called it something else, the Scar of Cadia. From orbit, it looks like a wound, a rent in the stars. Where once a world stood proud, now only debris circles a single black mass, a remnant bound in silence. You cannot scan it. You cannot land there. You can only listen, and some still do. Aboard the pilgrim frigate Crucible of Dust, a chronicler with a half-ruined augmetic eye plays the signal every night. She doesn't know why. She only knows it speaks in a tongue older than the Imperium, older than even memory. The chain is still whole. She writes the words again, each time, as though they might one day change. They never do. And yet, she keeps listening. Elsewhere, deep within the librarious vaults of a shattered Astartes chapter, one who once called Cadia sacred ground, a psyker dreams of two brothers, one who walked into the fire, one who became it. In the dream, they speak of stars. In the dream, the fire does not consume. It guards. When he wakes, he marks the day with blood and ink. Kyle endures. His fellow librarians think it madness, but they do not remove the words. Some truths, even broken ones, are heavier than silence. 1,000 years pass, then 2. The Imperium bleeds, regenerates. New saints are crowned. Old wars repeat with new names. The eye pulses wider again, but not beneath, not where the vault lies. There, in the ruins, something watches still, not with eyes, with purpose. The obsidian throne, grown over now with petrified root and runes older than men, still thrums, still pulses once every 13 hours, still says, "The gate is closed." And in the dark beneath it, where no one breathes and time forgets its name, a presence remains. It does not speak. It does not sleep. It remembers. It remembers solace, blade in hand. It remembers brothers laughing beneath the stars. It remembers silence, chosen, not out of fear, but out of love. And it waits, not for rescue, not for reward, just to hold the line, so that others might stand, so that somewhere a voice might say, "Cadia fell, but we did not let it fall alone." And in that there is no sorrow, only meaning.